morning, everyone. Well, it's actually like noon right now. I already took John to the park. He just ate and now he's like laying on the floor in a food coma because it's so hot outside that our apartment's a little hot. Even with the air conditioning on, the sun coming in, everything, he's still like... So, yeah. I'm gonna take off now and we're gonna do a vlog on one of Hollywood's cool men. I mean, this guy was as cool as it got. And if you ever saw KOJAK, you knew him, baby. Yep, today we are gonna go to the grave of the great Telly Savalas. I'm gonna tell you why he believed in the supernatural, why he shaved his head, why he kept his head shaved, and why he was so cool. Daze with Jordan the Lion begins now. So Telly Savalas is buried at Hollywood Hills Forest Lawn. There it is. And where he's buried is right up here beyond the church. Okay, I have found his grave once before, but it did take quite a while to find it, so we'll see what we can do. Well, here he is. The grave of not only Telly Savalas, but his first wife, Catherine. Telly Savalas became a pop culture icon. I think everybody knew who KOJAK was, if you were around in that time. And Telly had a pretty interesting life and a pretty interesting career and philosophy on life because he was not a trained actor. He was just a guy who had a ton of charisma. People would constantly say, he's not a good looking guy, but man, there is something attractive about him. Even Angie Dickinson said you couldn't be around the guy. He was so just charismatic. People were drawn to him, and he had this larger than life personality, and that's why he made KOJAK such a success. He was really almost just playing himself. Now, Telly Savalas always believed that his success was just a bubble that was gonna pop someday. He knew once he started getting roles that he said, you know, I'll take over Hollywood, I'll be the biggest thing, and then I'll lose it all. He never really did, actually. But that was his mentality, and that's how he lived his life. And it all really started from his early days in Garden City, New York. See, Telly's family was, it was an interesting Greek family, a big family. In fact, his grandfather started having kids at the age of 50 and had 27 kids. Telly's father didn't go quite that far, but Telly said that he learned a lot from his father. One thing he learned was that you could have everything, lose it, and keep bouncing right back. He said at one time, my dad was a millionaire, and then the Great Depression, we lost it all. And he said his dad was kind of a good con man. His dad would find ways of making money when there was no real money or no real product to be made from. He was a restaurateur, and like I said, with the Great Depression hitting, it hit everybody. People couldn't afford to go out and eat quite like they used to. But what his dad would do is his dad was smart enough to con people in kind of an odd way. He would charge people to walk on the beach and tell them it was a private beach. They had to pay a quarter when it was actually a free beach to walk on. So Telly learned from this, and he said, basically, I just took that on throughout my whole life. I never really planned for a career. He said, I wanted to do a ton of things. That from the time I was a kid, I wanted to be a cowboy, I wanted to be an actor, I wanted to be a teacher, I wanted to be a fireman, I wanted to be a cop, I wanted to be everything, but I never really focused on any of them. And he just kind of kept letting his charm take him through life. Now, what I mean by that is he really just bluffed his way into just about everything, including a government job, including getting his own radio show with people like Ava Gardner and Frank Sinatra as the guest. He found out that they were looking for someone with a good voice to to have this radio show. It was gonna be Telly's Coffee Shop, and he would interview these people, and he just went in there, acted like he knew what he was doing, got the gig, and next thing you know, everybody loved him. People were constantly writing to the station telling him how much they loved Telly. But much like I said, he always believed that right around the corner life could change, and he said actually that's the beauty of life, is the unpredictability of it. He said, I don't really stress or really worry about what will happen after I quit being a star, because I'll always have the stories to tell people. I used to be a big star back in the day. You know, he said, I always knew, you know, something would happen that could change that, and it did. When Telly's time with doing the radio show ended, he then found himself married, not making any money, and his wife was supporting him. Wonderful Catherine right here, holding 2 jobs to support them. Finally, Telly had his mom pull some strings. His mom was an artist and she knew people, and what she basically did was she got Telly a job directing a community theater, and through that he then got a government job, and through that, much like I said, he would con his way into something new. And one day, working that government job and directing the theater, he got a call, and they were looking for someone to do a Greek judge part. And so the person that Telly was going to recommend couldn't make it, so Telly's mom said, why don't you just go do it? And so he did. He went in, he auditioned, and basically acted like he couldn't speak English very well, and got the gig. And he said from that moment on, when I showed up to do it, and they said, oh, you're so great, how long have you been an actor? I said, 3 days. And he said it wasn't but a week later that I was cast playing, I believe it was Mickey Cohen, the mobster. And he said, I was given a star part on live television, and remembering the lines was never really a problem, and I just kind of went from there. He said, next thing you know, I was having TV and radio offers, and he had a whole new career. Now, Telly's big break really would come when he was in his mid-30s. He would get cast in The Young Savages, the John Frankenheimer picture, and he would be playing opposite Burt Lancaster. Now, they didn't even want to see him for this. In fact, John said, you know, he had a relative, Telly had a relative that kept trying to get us to see him, and we're like, no, because she told us, and he wanted her to tell us, that he was a school teacher. And I said, I'm not hiring a school teacher to play opposite Burt Lancaster. But they said they weren't finding anybody that really was fitting in the part that they wanted, and so they said, okay, fine, bring in the teacher. And he came in and he just absolutely blew him away, holding his own with Burt Lancaster. And they said that was all part of his plan. He said, well, I figured if they thought that I was just a teacher, they wouldn't have any high expectations, and I could even, you know, get a better response out of him. And he did. And from that, they would go on to the same group. Frankenheimer and Burt Lancaster would go on to make The Birdman of Alcatraz, and ended up casting Telly to play Burt Lancaster's roommate, the Birdman. Now, the reason that was such a huge deal is because guess who got nominated for an Academy Award? That's right. Best Supporting Actor nomination. He didn't win, but his brother said, I was all the way across the world and I heard that my brother was nominated for an Academy Award. The family told me, and he said, I didn't believe it for a second. He said, I just immediately thought, this is our crazy, wacky family and their crazy, wacky stories. But no, he was. And this just continued. He would be offered role after role from that because of, like I said, he had this charisma, this honesty, and he was really macho. And during that time, they wanted people who weren't quite so good looking. They wanted real people that could be believable, that the average guy could see themselves in. And so one of his next big roles would actually be the role that would create the look that we would know for Telly Savalas. It's why he would become bald. It was George Stevens doing The Greatest Story Ever Told. Now, George Stevens was a huge director in that day. He was known for these epic pictures, Diary of Anne Frank and A Place in the Sun and Giant, and now he was going to do the story of Jesus Christ, and he wanted Telly Savalas to be Pontius Pilate. And so he went to him and he said, Telly, would you consider shaving your head? I think it would add an air of dominance and just maybe a little bit of fear. And Telly said, I don't really have a problem with it, I'll do it, but what I am kind of concerned is that I have some kids at home, and I'm afraid that they may just be shocked by the change, which is kind of strange because Telly was already going bald. But what they said was, George said, well, why don't we invite your kids in and they can be part of the ceremony of us shaving your head, and then, you know, they'll see it in person. And so that's what they did. They invited the kids in and they watched it, and the kids didn't even care. They weren't fazed by it one bit. And Telly said, you know, it worked. And he said, when I called my mom to tell her, I mean, we were a very religious family, I said, Mom, I'm gonna be in the greatest story ever told. She said, you're gonna make a great Jesus. And I said, well, Mom, I'm not actually gonna be Jesus, I'm gonna be Pontius Pilate. And Pontius Pilate was the man who judges Jesus. And she said, okay, well, whatever you do, just play it sympathetically. And so it wasn't that Telly really preferred this look, this being bald look or anything. That's not why he kept the look after the movie. He said, I just kept getting cast for stuff, and I was getting cast so often I didn't have a chance to let it grow out. And so I just got used to it. And he said, and I just figured, you know, to heck with it, man. It's just more face to shave, you know. And so that's what he did. And that, he said, was that attitude was how he took his entire life. He said, I always just knew if things could go south at any time, I was going to enjoy life. Money was meant to add to your life experience. And so he started living life to the fullest, and through that became KOJAK. So for 5 years, Telly would be this famous detective KOJAK, and what made him so great was that he was basically what you would come to think of these hard-nosed New York investigators. And he did it then where he was working off of instinct but didn't have a problem roughing somebody up to get the truth out. And they said what changed this for TV that really wasn't done was most television shows in those days were filmed on a backlot, and this show had the guts to go out and actually film on the streets of New York City where these stories were taking place. And who loves you, baby became a catchphrase that everyone knew. You'd see Telly Savalas with that big smirk on his face and that lollipop hanging out of his mouth, and he just became a cult icon. Telly ended up making almost, well, just under 100 movies. Quite a phenomenal career for a guy who spent so much of his time making television and making a #1 television show of all things. Now, if you're wondering about the inscription here, his middle name was Aristotle. You can see is connected to this. It says, the hour of departure has arrived, and we go our ways. I to die and you to live, which is better, God only knows. And it must be family that comes out here, but you'll notice that that's his family member here. The middle name's Socrates. And they've got the little golden angels on both grave headstones, as well as a few of these jewels. Telly Savalas' biggest influence and biggest inspiration in his life, despite loving his mother unconditionally, was his father. And when his father died, it was a huge shock to him and a real defining moment in his life. And his father had died of bladder cancer, which is sadly in the 90s the same thing that took Telly Savalas' life. If you're looking for some great material to check out Telly Savalas, because you may not know who he is or you may not know his story until today, definitely check out The Birdman of Alcatraz. If you can find KOJAK on YouTube, which there's quite a few of them on there, check that out. The Greatest Story Ever Told, and The Dirty Dozen. You'll definitely see the charisma. You'll see, you know, like I said, people would say, you know, he just wasn't a good-looking guy in the classical sense, but boy, his charisma could just take over. Now, one of the mysteries to Telly's life story has always been his military career. No one, including his family members, said they could ever get a story out of him. And there was so many stories attached to his time in the military that no one really knows the truth. They said one of the stories was that he was wounded in war, and one of the stories was that he was a secret spy in South Africa for the US government. And then one of the stories that came out that they believe really is the truth is that they said that he was on leave and was in a car accident, a pretty bad car accident, and that sidelined him for over a year. And then he was discharged, but his family said, including his second wife, she said even when I would ask him, he would kind of just say it's not important to talk about, and his brothers would say the same thing. They just never really knew what his story was, why he didn't want to talk about it. Rest in peace, big guy. We love you, baby. 72 years old isn't a bad run. I'm pretty sure it's not, but when I first saw this, the first thing I thought was, wait a minute. Is this where Mitzi Shore's grave is and they just haven't put a name there or anything? I don't think so, but I don't know for sure either. I looked online, there's no final resting place yet for Mitzi Shore listed. A lot of famous people buried over in this section. Paul Walker's up here, Jerry Buss, the former owner of the Lakers. But I've vlogged a lot of that before. Now, I've been here many, many times and never known they had an outdoor chapel here. It's actually a little further up than any of the grave plots. Wow, that's a beauty. It's got a quote from the Declaration of Independence up there. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think since we're kind of in the area, I might take us over to Bob's Big Boy. There's a photo I've been wanting to match up over there for a while. Maybe I'll do it today. Here's Warner Brothers Studios, and this is the gate from Blazing Saddles, and we see Hedley Lamar come running out of here across the street. Nope, no car hop service for us today. Okay. So if you go all the way back to that black and white photo of Debbie Reynolds in her car right here, you can see her talking to somebody right out in front of her car. Matches up right about here. So we got a pretty good seat right here looking at the Big Boy Banks and the pie. I just went for the lunch counter because every seat in this place is full right now. This place does have a really cool old school vibe to it and some old photos on the walls. Oddly enough, I was hoping to get a chef salad, but they don't actually have the chef salad. They have a couple of other type, but not the chef, so I think I'm gonna get the Big Boy with a side salad. Now I'm kind of wishing I would have ordered breakfast instead. Well, there's part one. All right, there we go. Check this out. The classic Bob's Red Relish. Almost every seat in this place is full, and it's like 2:30 p.m. All right, excellent. We have finished up. The food was amazing, as you would expect. Now let's go back and hang out with Ja. Safe to say you've been working hard since I left? Hey Ja, did you miss me? Did you miss me? You did? It's my boy. Tell him, the battle mat's out. It's time to fight, isn't it? Is it time to fight? He just literally rolls on his side waiting. Is it time to fight? Come here. This guy. Alright, so at the beginning of the video I mentioned that Telly Savalas believed in the supernatural, and here's why. He told this story in an interview. He said that one night before he was an actor, when he was still doing that government job, he ran out of gas. and went up to I believe it was a gas station that was already closed, and he said, is there any place around here I can get gas? And the guy inside said, yeah, go here, 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 basically telling him where to walk, and said there's an all-night gas station there and they'll give you a can and you can get some gas there. So he said he started to walk through like a wooded area, and all of a sudden this car, in a distance, he heard a guy with like almost an effeminate voice yell, "I'll give you a ride." I know, that's what he said. So he goes over and he says, well, okay, you know, thank you. And he hops in the car, and he said that the person in the car had a high voice and was wearing an all-white suit. And he said along the way, he started feeling around in his pockets, and he realized he couldn't find money. And without asking or anything, the guy driving said that he would loan him money, or he said, I'll give you $1. And Telly Savalas said, I was really ashamed because I actually didn't have any money. And I told the guy, you know, please give me your address so that I can at least mail you the $1 back. I'm horribly ashamed. So he said the guy wrote down his phone number and his address to mail back the money, and took him to the gas station. He got the gas, and on the way back he said that the guy said, do you know baseball? And Telly Savalas said, yeah, I mean, I follow it. And he said the name of a player for the Boston Red Sox, and Telly Savalas said, I don't know who that is. And the guy said, he's a good utility infielder for the Red Sox. And Telly Savalas said, I thought that was weird because there was nothing that brought that up. There was, like in our conversation, there was nothing, that we weren't talking baseball or anything. Anyway, he said he dropped me off in my car, I put the gas in my car, and I was on my way. And he said the very next day, that utility infielder for the Red Sox that he had mentioned died, and it was on the news. And I thought, that's strange that he had just told me about that guy. And so he said a couple of days went by, and it was really eating at me that I hadn't got the money back. So there was actually a phone number on that address that he gave me, and he said, I called the phone number and I asked for Mr. Cullen. And they said, who? He said, Mr. Cullen. They said, okay, hold on. And then a woman got on the phone and said, can I ask what you want? And he said, I want to speak to Mr. Cullen. He gave me a ride home the other night and loaned me some money for gas, and I want to repay him. And she got quiet for a moment and then said, listen, you SOB, that's my husband and he died 2 years ago. Don't ever call me again. And hung up on him. And he said a couple of days went by, and I just couldn't let it go. He said, I just couldn't get it out of my head. So he said I went there and talked to her, and told her everything that had happened. And she said that her husband had died 2 years ago. When he was buried in a white suit, and that he had shot himself through the voice box, is how Telly Savalas described it. And he said ever since then he had always believed in anything supernatural, because he said he had never had any kind of thought about coincidence or anything, you know, anything beyond just being happenstance. But he said after that he always thought that anything was possible. Well, have a great night, everyone. We will see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.